My name is Josh Sweeney with Atcore Systems. The presentation today is going to be on why users aren't using your CRM and how to fix that. What you'll see is if you go out to Google and you search for user adoption, you're going to get about 4.3 million results of people talking, writing about user adoption, telling you a little bit about how to fix it. Come on in.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Do you have Chick-fil-A?
We do. Did they just come?
Yeah, I'll
All right, so you're going to have about 4.3 million results on user adoption. So a lot of people are writing articles about user adoption, why people aren't using it. And at a high level, they're really discussing different ways to fix it, right? All of the best practices. So what I'm going to do here today is I'm going to talk a little bit about why, just for a short slide, but I think people have written that one to death. What I really want to do is stop and get some Chick-fil-A. You guys ready? So I left off talking a little bit about user adoption, how we're going to go into a little bit of the why, but again, that's been written about extensively online, right? Why people don't adopt a CRM, what are some of those problems and causes. So if you look up here, the first one you'll see is culture. A lot of times there's not a culture alignment. You'll get a company where we've worked with some heavy equipment sales and rental dealers, and they were very worried about adopting technology because of their culture, because of the demographic and the people that are in their organization. Some of these companies have an aging group. Some of them have various different issues where the culture just is not a technology-driven culture, right? If I go into a technology company, they're going to adopt CRM very quickly, and the inverse happens at maybe a large insurance company, right? So they're just not going to be as well suited to pick up on that technology quickly. So you have to understand what are those issues before you go in to implement, and know that the silver bullet isn't just implementing the technology no matter what the vendor tells you. Another one's budget. A lot of people do big bang implementations. So big bang implementation is we need a new CRM. We're going to carve out a budget of $70,000, $100,000, whatever it might be. They go spend all of their money, and then they don't have an ongoing budget for ongoing changes. For the subsequent year, for the subsequent months, whatever it might be. So they come up with that budget, and instead of spreading it out and adapting as the business changes, they spend all of that money and it's gone, right? So 3 years later, what happens is they haven't changed the CRM in 3 years. The business has had a lot of changes, and then they start hunting for, should we go purchase a new CRM? It's a lot easier if you just keep up with the CRM as it changes and stretch out that budget a little more and learn from the users as you go. Some other ones are communication. So communication strategy, how are you going to communicate to the users? How are you going to talk about new updates? When a new update is announced that you're rolling out, what we see a lot of times is, say for example, Salesforce rolls out a new update. What they do is say, hey, we're in maintenance mode on this weekend. We're going to do this update. Salesforce told us this, or Dynamics, whatever you have. And then they do the update and they come back to the office and they have new CRM. What we don't see is the communication strategy around that and the training that says, hey, here are the new features that came in as part of the update. Here's how we use those as part of the business. So a lot of times the vendor is giving you plenty of updates that might be helpful, but the training and communication strategy isn't there. Same thing with the marketing plan. What are you doing to market up the chain and to the individual users? So for example, a CRM, new implementation or new users, new features, whatever it might do, if you don't have a marketing strategy that goes and tells the C-level suite what successes you're having with the CRM and how that's moving the needle, then when it comes time to renew those licenses or get more budget or adapt with the company and have those changes, they just look at it as an expense, right? So you want to change the mindset from a marketing perspective of, is this an expense, or is this something where I'm getting $5 return on every dollar spent, and here's the metrics that show that. Same thing inversely for marketing to the individual users. So going back to the training and communication strategy, those are all kind of interwoven together, where those individual users need to know what those changes are, what are the benefits of those changes, and how are they going to be used. On that note, we also see a lot of sharing across the board. So some of the best companies we've seen around user adoption will take one of their power users and they'll do a video, right? So they take the influencer in the group, their top selling person, people listen to them, they understand what they do, they understand the impact, they also may be the top CRM user, and they'll do videos of them. Hey, here's how I use the CRM, right? Here's how I use whatever CRM is in place to help sell more, right? There's a reason I blow out my quota. I use this thing, right? And hopefully that's the case. So when they share that with their other teammates, that is internal marketing across the board to get other people to use it, right? To get past some of the naysayers or the late adopters or whatever it might be. Other things we've seen for reasons people don't adopt it, data entry. A lot of these systems are built with the manager in mind, right? So you have one manager in mind that you're building it for because they need the data out of the system and they want you to log every activity you do as a salesperson, and the salespeople completely reject that. And it's built for one manager, even though there's 20, 30 users below them that are really the people providing that data. So a big part of it is a user-first approach. Our opinion in our organization is if you build it for the managers, the users are going to use it just enough to not get fired. If you build it for the users, they're actually going to use it, go out and sell more, see the benefit, and the management's going to get more data than they would ever know what to do with. That's kind of our philosophy in our organization. And lastly is stale CRM. So we talked about it earlier. We talked about how a CRM goes stale after just a few years, right? If you don't have an ongoing budget, the business is changing rapidly. It's changing sometimes on a monthly basis depending on how quickly it's growing. And all of a sudden you end up with this stale CRM that doesn't match the business process. So if it doesn't match the business process, people just stop using it, right? If you changed how you did quoting in your product line and the CRM didn't keep up with that quoting and product line change or shift, then it's just not going to be as useful anymore. Any questions on some of the whys? All right, so that's about 7 of the hundreds of reasons you're going to see online, right? So there's all kinds of data again on why people don't use it, on some very high level reasons or ways to fix it. What I really want to do today is get in the how to fix it portion. So what I'm going to present is how Atcore goes about fixing this problem, okay? A lot of those items they're a lot of work, right? Jessica's a Salesforce admin, and if I told her she had to put together that entire strategy, communications, marketing, everything else, she might say, I don't have enough time, I don't have enough budget, I don't have enough people, right? So what is the fix when you don't have that, unlimited funds or enough money to address every one of those best practices? In our view, the fix is really to go to the user. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through how we go to the user. My goal for today is really not to give you a bunch of high-level information. It's really to give you steps that you can go back into your business and use and get people to use new features, adopt the CRM, or overcome whatever issue you might have. So keep in mind that this is a 3-day analysis that we usually do. I'm going to condense this probably down into about 30 minutes. So we have a lot of forms that people fill out, pre-done surveys and everything else that we use to go do this in a quick, efficient manner. But with this 3-day process, what we do is we're going to look at the business. So we're going to look at a lot of different features of the business. We're going to do management interviews and understand information from the management team. And then our final goal is really to get in front of the users and listen and understand what their issues are, why they're having problems, why they don't use it, what changes need to be made to really increase that user adoption. So from an information gathering perspective, when we look at the business, what we're going to look at is the reporting structure. We're going to look at the current investment that they have, and we're going to outline some of the user groups. That's kind of our first step. So in the first half of day 1, what we do and what you would do when you go back into your organization is you would start gathering the information. Now in your organization, you may already know a lot of this. It's good to try and rediscover it because things may have changed over the time that you would have compiled this originally. For us, we just need to know all this information, and we may be going into a fresh new company, so we have to do this information gathering piece. First thing is ownership. Who owns the CRM? Is it IT? Is it sales? Who's the biggest decision maker? Who's the influencer? So we try to build out that network of ownership of who really makes the decisions around this. What is that reporting structure? Next thing are the influencers. Who influences that reporting structure? Like I said, you could have a top salesperson that has the ear of a manager because they use it the most. Okay, so you need to know who those influencers are. So you're going to start to build out this whole network and gather the information on reporting structure. The next thing is approvals. So who makes the approvals? Is it finance? What's the approval process? Does that go to a board? And of the people who make the approvals, or the group that makes the approvals, what do they lean most towards? Is it more of a morale play, right? Do they want to increase morale? Are they very heavy into company culture? Are they more financial, where the dollars matter more than anything and they need to know the metrics around it before they're going to make a decision? You need to know of those people which ones play in which space, right? Because that's going to have a major difference in the impact of what you're about to discover. And finally on here is the roadmap. We want to determine what the roadmap is. What is the quarterly plan for the CRM system? What are they trying to address on a quarter-over-quarter basis, a year-over-year basis? And what this does is this gives you and me, going in to consult with a customer or to work in your organization, an idea of, do they have a long-term vision? Okay? Are they doing the big bang implementation and they expect people to just go use it? Or have they really thought through spreading out the budget, having quarterly budget for implementing and solving problems as they arise? So that quarterly roadmap is going to tell you a lot more than just what their plan is with the CRM. The next thing we do for the information gathering, and the last piece, is really understanding the economic factors as part of the CRM. So what is the current amount that they spend on recurring licenses, right? How many seats do they have? What level of CRM do they have? Is it Pro? Is it Enterprise? Is it Ultimate? Is it which version is it? What other licenses and hardware and software do they have? What add-ons do they have? What does that entire economic situation look like? Also with that, how much have they spent with consultants or third-party people to come in and do the implementation? Did they spend a lot in the first year and has it trailed off? Are they outsourcing the entire piece to another group or another firm? What does that spend look like, right? So this really helps when you're looking at the economic factors of how to overcome these issues, right? If you know they're not spending any money, then you know how to portray that later when you need to make changes. If you know there's a certain amount of budget that they're shooting towards, then you know how to calculate the ROI and understand what users need and determine what needs to move up to the top based on that budget. So this information gathering gives you a lot of the detail you need for some of the things that we're going to talk about. The other thing is internal resources. Don't discount the cost of internal resources. Is it one person, that makes $70,000 a year and spends 50% of the time, therefore it's $35,000 a year going to CRM? Is it a full-time admin? Is it 4 full-time admins? What does that look like? So get a good picture of what the economic factors of the CRM implementation are. Any questions on those 2 slides? All right. The last part of just the general information gathering, again, this is normally about a half-day exercise, right? You're going around to each one of these departments, you're having to gather data, they have to go to accounting to give you some of these numbers. So the last part of this is really understanding the users in each department that are using the CRM. These are CRM users, not just your standard structure. What their roles and functions are, what their daily quota and expectations are. So let me give you an example. I need to know that there's 20 people on the inside sales team that are using the CRM, and there's 10 on the executive sales team or outside sales, and there's 4 in support, whatever it might be, or double those numbers. And I need to know what their roles and what their function is, and I need to know their daily quota and expectations, right? I need to know, is it expected of this inside sales rep to log at least 60 activities or 100 activities a day dealing with inside sales or inbound leads, whatever it might be. And I need to know, what do they normally trend, right? What do they do? Because later when I go in to understand how they're incentivized and the ROI, then I need to have those numbers in hand, right? So look at those groups. And then out of those groups, who are the influencers and leads, right? The person I'm going to interview later, I'm looking for who are the top 3 that I'm going to go interview, and what questions am I going to ask them? So I'm really just building out, again, more of this hierarchy and group structure and influence structure to know later when I go do these interviews who I'm going to interview, why, and what metrics I'm trying to address. All right? So after that portion, we're going to look at the business analysis of, we're going to get into the business side, or we're going to continue down the business side, excuse me. The two things we really want to understand here are the success from a qualitative perspective and the success from a quantitative perspective. Why do I separate those? Some people are morale driven, some people are numbers driven, right? So you can't just say, hey, I'm going to pitch you on the ROI of this item when they go, well, I just don't feel like it's working. If they say feel, you need to lean towards the qualitative, right? If they use words like feel, no matter how many numbers you give them, they may just not care, right? I mean, some of them may be very profound and they'll start to look, but they really care about how the users feel when they use the system. You have other people that are going to look more on the other side at the numbers. Well, you know what? They just need to use it, and here's what the spend is, and you need to tell me, how much it's going to move the needle from a metrics perspective, right? And that's just a personality profile. That's how it works. So what I like to do is understand both sides of those from when I go to interview the managers. So what does this look like? We're going to go in, and what you would do is you would go in and you'd find the CRM owner that you identified and the executives that you identified that manage the budget or manage the CRM or the owners of the CRM. So this is the CRM owner and executives interview piece. And you would understand how they think and feel about the CRM, right? So you would say, I need to know how you feel about the CRM. What is CRM success to you? Paint me a picture of what that looks like, right? And they're going to come up and they're going to tell you what they think that is, right? Everybody uses it. They can go to it and understand their pipeline. The managers use it. They're going to paint whatever picture it is that they need. The next thing that we like to do is we like to survey them and have them rank it, right? So even though this is the qualitative piece, we say on a scale of 1 to 10, rank how you think the CRM is doing, right? So 1 being it's atrocious, and if they pulled it out tomorrow, I wouldn't care. And 10 being everybody loves it, it's a needle mover, we have to have it, right? So that gives you a number and a metric across this manager and all the other managers. When we go in and do this, keep in mind that this is any managers that, or excuse me, any of the CRM owners or executives that you've identified that have a role in the CRM. Okay, so this could be 1 person, this could be maybe up to 3 or even 5 people. Maybe there's a board of people. I also recommend you do these interviews on a one-on-one basis. If you get everybody in a room, they play off each other. You get weird dynamics. Tom over here is the lead, and whatever he says, people listen to. So you really don't get to the meat of the subject, right? So do these interviews one-on-one, and they don't have to take a whole lot of time. The other question is really what do they want to see? What do they want to see moving forward? So that's going to play into, what users need later and how you can interweave the message of what the users need into what the business wants to see or what those influencers need as well. So ask them what they want to see. What does the roadmap look like? What additions or changes do you see happening over the next year with the CRM? Okay, so this is that qualitative piece. In the same interview, we're going to ask very similar questions except on the quantitative piece. So when we're interviewing them, same thing. What are the current success metrics? So, can you tell me that this person is logging this many activities a day? Or was the goal of the CRM to increase sales, right? And how are we tracking that it increased sales per person? How are we running that number? What is that metric? How are you tracking it? And how are you ensuring that it's moving in the direction that you want? Okay. A lot of times what we see is they don't have those. It just doesn't happen. We get in and people say, well, it's just not providing the value that we need. We've seen it with every vendor. It's very vendor agnostic. It's not providing the value we need. Well, what metrics are you determining that value on? Well, and they kind of put their finger in there and come up with something, but it's nothing that a third party can't come in and calculate and say, yes, this has moved from $1 million in sales a person to $2 million in sales a person on an average, and we think that's because we implemented X, Y, and Z feature where the CRM was proactive in coming out to the person and keeping the relationship going, right? They may say that we did a new lead campaign, right? So you need to know how do you calculate that, and there's going to be other factors that come in. Of course, you can't have a static situation where that's the exact cause, but there are some ways that you can try to tease that out. The next thing in that same survey that we send is a quantitative ranking. So, on a 1 to 10, how much is this moving that metric, right? If they don't have that metric, they can't really give you the number on that, okay? And so they're going to say, well, we don't have the metric, so I can't rank it. That's going to be a good indicator later of some of the things that you might need to provide, because I can tell you if you're going to finance and you have to get budget through finance, you're going to need the numbers, right? If the person is a CFO that determines what the budget is, then you're going to have some metrics. And if you don't have those, that's the reason they're going to look at that and say, well, we're not spending anything else on it. If you can't really prove that model. And then what metrics would they like to have? So if they don't have these during this executive interview, what metrics do you want to track? When you implemented this 2 years ago, what did you have in mind, right? And a lot of times that's shifted and that's changed. So during this interview, if they don't have those metrics, again, try and get them. I know one company, they did an implementation. They used to do 80 activities per day, per person, times 20 people. They went from a specialized system that they didn't have people to manage that had been around for years into a CRM. So they went from specialized to more generic, and their activities dropped off a little bit because the screens weren't optimized to do what they used to do. So that was their metric. Their metric was activities because it was a person that sits in the inside sales role handling inbound leads, and that's all that they did all day. So it's very easy to look at those metrics for, kind of like a call center environment. Do you have any questions on that? On the CRM owner and executive interviews?
Okay. I have a question.
Yeah.
To me, I think you're covering a really valid point, but there are some business outcomes that are hard to measure.
Yes.
For example, some companies deploy CRM to improve cross-team collaboration. How do you measure that?
Yeah, so that may be an issue around, how are you going to measure that? One, that's why we do the qualitative and quantitative, because we're going to go in and first I'm going to say, well, cross-team collaboration is really hard to measure. How do you feel collaboration is now, right? And they're going to say, well, it's a 5. Okay, well, we implemented, I see you have a Microsoft shirt on. So we implemented Dynamics and we rolled in, the chat client that goes in with that, right? We have an all Microsoft stack and now they have, I think it was Messenger. What's the product? What's the communication platform that Microsoft uses? Do you know? Well, they have Skype. They had Messenger built in and they had another piece of that. Link. Okay. So.
It's not because I'm with Microsoft or.
No, I was just curious.
It's a problem that happens across the board.
Regardless of the CRM solution you use. And the problem with that is that when the managers tell you, I feel it's a 5, how can you argue that back?
Right.
How can you say, no, it's a 9? It's
So that's the good thing about it. No matter whether it's a Microsoft or Chatter or whatever it is, right? You have the ability to go in and say, how do you feel communication is before we implement this? That's the goal. Or maybe directly after, right? It may not be that great right after. It may take a month.
For the collaboration, like a big problem at companies is that we don't know what the other divisions are doing. Like this happens a lot, where you start pursuing a lead and you don't know that they've been doing business with another division in the company for 4 years.
Right.
So they go and say, oh, let me talk to you about our company. It's like, what are you guys talking about? I've been doing business with you guys for 4 years. That kind of collaboration amongst teams is one of the biggest problems and one of the biggest reasons why they get a CRM system in the first place.
Right.
So it's hard to demonstrate that CRM improved cross-team collaboration with numbers.
It is, yeah. And that's why we have that qualitative piece. I mean, you're 100% right. There's no silver bullet to go in and say collaboration was a 90%, and now it's at 100%, right? So what we would do is we would lean more on the qualitative direction, which is why we do both. And we'd say, what is it now? What is it in 3 months? What is it in 6 months? What is it in 9 months? And not only are we going to do that in these interviews with the executives and the people who implemented it or asked for it, but we're going to do it with the team members, right? We're going to go out to them and say, has collaboration been affected in a positive way? Rank that for me. So all of these rankings and surveys that you do, it's a 2-question survey. Rank it on collaboration, rank it on the metrics of collaboration, right? Now, from the metrics side, you have to get a little more creative. You have to take the software that you implemented or the solution that you implemented to increase collaboration and determine, is that trending up, right? So, for example, if I'm working on an opportunity now, I go in and work opportunity, I'm in Sugar CRM, I'm using activity streams, right? Or you're using Chatter, or whatever product it is, right? I'm going to be able to go in and say, I'll pull up an opportunity or an account, and I'll say, hey Ryan, what's the deal with this account? I thought we were doing X, Y, and Z, right? And I do it in the CRM system, and then I get a response back. Now, from a metric perspective, I can see how many people I'm reaching out to that are outside of my organization or outside of my peer group right there in the company, depending on size, of course. And I can see, do those collaboration numbers increase? Are they using at least the functionality that facilitates that collaboration? So that's how I would go in and try and drive some metrics to that if I was a heavy metrics-driven organization, is I would say, you know what, before you implemented this, on a qualitative perspective, it was a 5, okay? Now that you implemented it, rank it again. And before you implemented it, we had no numbers, but 90 days after this, you've had, 100 conversations of people outside the organ, or just 100 conversations period within the CRM solution, and now you're having about 300, right? So a lot of it, you can reach out to other vendors as well and see what they do from a metrics perspective. So I would go out and do the research and say, what does Yammer do, right? If Yammer wants to prove metrics, what does Yammer do, right? They look at some sort of collaboration piece and determine what those outcomes are. So that's how I would try and play into the metrics, just to at least show a trend. Not perfect, but again, you're at least proving the model, right? You're proving that people are using it. The inverse is you discover people aren't using it. Maybe it's just a training issue, right? So maybe you find out when you go do these user interviews that you say, well, how's it going with this piece of this collaboration tool? Are you using this piece of the solution? And they're going to say, what are you talking about? Right? We see that happen all the time. It comes out new, the communication isn't there. So those are kind of the two ways I would try to address it. But there are certain things where metrics are just too hard to get. I try to go the simple route and say, what's the easiest number I can get to at least prove the trend? Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so that's quantitative. What metrics would you like to have? Next is we take it down a level. So we did an interview with the CRM user, or excuse me, the CRM owners, the executives, and we're going to take this down a level and we're going to add a little bit more. We're going to get into the management analysis. I'm not going to go through each one of these. I've already talked about the outlining the user groups. I've talked about understanding success, the metrics, and qualitative and quantitative, so I'm going to skip over those. But basically, we're repeating the cycle. We're asking the same people that own the CRM and the same executives that manage the CRM, we're asking the same questions, quantitative and qualitatively, to the management, and we're actually going to ask those all the way down to the user. So what we're going to start to see is a picture of alignment. Is there alignment within the organization on this, or is everybody everywhere? And that's going to help in the outcome and what we produce from this, okay? So what I would do is when you go back to your organization, you're going to do a management one-on-one. You're going to get a manager in the room, right? So you have the profile. There are 6 departments using it. There's 6 managers or 8 managers in those departments, whatever it might be. And you're going to do one-on-one interviews. Within this interview, you're going to understand the success qualitatively and quantitatively, like we just mentioned. And the next thing that you're going to do is you're going to do 2 other items in here that are the management use analysis and the group ROI analysis. So what are these? When you go do the management use analysis, what you are physically going to do is sit with that manager and say, show me everything you use in the CRM. How do you manage people with the CRM? Show me your dashboard. If an opportunity pipeline isn't right, what do you do, right? So you're going to ask questions and listen. This is all this is about, right? It's about getting to the user and saying, what happens here, right? So we go in and I say, how do you use the CRM to do your one-on-ones with your sales team? Well, we don't do one-on-ones. Okay, maybe it's a process issue. Why don't you do one-on-ones? You're going to listen and understand why that happens, right? And that may be outside the CRM, okay? So that may be something for you to address from a process, business perspective, whatever it might be. If they do one-on-ones, tell me how you do those. Oh, well, I go in and I look at the data, and then I email, the salesperson and say, go compile your information and get it all together, put it in a document in this spreadsheet that we use every time, and he prints it out, and then he brings it into my office, and we sit down and we go over the spreadsheet, right? That's a common one I hear. Okay. How can we manage it in the CRM? right? You're listening for different cues of the manager is not managing using the data, therefore the users aren't going to use it, right? If I sit down and I do a one-on-one and I say, okay, Ryan, let's do our one-on-one today. It's 10 minutes. Here's how a one-on-one works. Boom, boom, boom. We're using Rockefeller habits or level 10 meetings or, traction methodology, whatever method you're using for your meetings to keep them efficient. You're going to pull up the dashboard, and I pull up one that says Ryan's sales, Ryan's dashboard, whatever it might be. And I say, here's your pipeline. Let's go through these. 3 of these have an opportunity close date that's already passed. What's the deal? Go update that. Right? Tell me about this opportunity. Oh, this is a high priority opportunity. This is a 6-figure deal. What's going on with that? What do you need help on? Right? So I'm pulling up the dashboard that shows him that I'm managing it in here. Now, in an organization that uses the CRM, that's not a problem. In an organization that's trying to adopt or overcome user adoption issues, what this a lot of times comes down to is, hey Ryan, I've pulled up your dashboard here and there's nothing there. So what are you going to do about, that? How are you going to fix it, right? Or it may be, obviously that is after a communication where you guys go set up his dashboard, you set up your dashboard. This isn't just, hey, I'm springing this on you, right? This is an expectation that's been set previously. But a lot of times we'll set that expectation in training that you have to have aligned dashboards. And you sit down with the user, or the salesperson, whoever it might be, support person, and there's nothing there. Well, unfortunately, if it's not there, it can't be closed, and you can't get a resource to help you quote the deal, right? The resources aren't there because you haven't filled out the qualification factors. We have 6 qualifying indicators on a lead, and if you don't fill those out, I don't know whether I need to give you a resource or how to time box that resource that is helping you generate the quote, right, if it's a complex deal. So it becomes a blocker for them if needed, if that's your methodology, right? So again, what you're just trying to do is understand where the alignment is with the manager, how they're using it for your analysis later. Because all you're gonna do, and all we do, is we compile all this information together and we come back with a list of recommendations. Hey, this is a process fix, right? This is free initially, right? Free in that you already have employees that understand the business and they can go change this process. Then here's all the other recommendations we have. Maybe it's a feature, maybe it's a new add-on, whatever it is. So you're looking for those. The other thing is group ROI analysis. So say I have 10 different groups that are using the CRM. One group is 3 users. They handle some inbound lead flow, their lead qualification group. They handle fairly low volume. Good opportunity there. I have another inside sales team that does the same thing in another department that uses the same CRM. They have 20 people and they're high volume, right? So what we do on this, because it's only a 3-day analysis for the first round and you only have a certain amount of time, is we look at each one of those groups and which one we think we can impact the most. So when we interview all the managers, we get a good picture of their groups, how many people there, and what the opportunity loss is, or what the opportunities are for managing new deals or leads or whatever it might be, and how do we increase that. So we'll go in and we'll say, okay, we've interviewed all your managers. Down the road, you may want to interview these other groups, but for this analysis, we're going to pick this group. This is the one we're going to move the needle on. And if you move the needle on that group, it's going to be a lot easier to get time to go do the other groups, okay? So part of this is just identifying which group is going to create the biggest impact should you discover everything that you need and really change for the better. Any questions on the management interviews? So this is kind of all the managers that are in the CRM. So again, I'm trying to give you, not anecdotal, not high level information around, what are the general ways to fix user adoption, really the steps that you can take to go into those organizations or into your organization and ask really compelling questions and get the answers you need to move the needle from a user adoption perspective. The last thing that we have is the actual user analysis. So this is where it starts to get deeper and deeper into the chain around who's using what, how they're using it. So what we'll do is we'll go in and we'll do the same rank the CRM on 1 to 10 on how much it helps you in your day, right? So a user may say, it's a 5. I don't really use it that much. Great, tell me about that. Why not, okay? So you'll ask some questions during this. A salesperson may say, well, I don't feel like I sell any more or less with it. Okay, well, let's look at your quarter over quarter and understand a little bit more about that. So this is kind of the one-on-one around asking questions, having them rank the CRM. So if you have 20 users and they all go rank it and it's all a 5, you have a lot to do. If you rank it and they all give it a 10, you may have a lot less to do. I don't know. But it gives you a good trend around how that group that you're analyzing is really viewing the CRM, how they feel about it, whether it's an impediment or whether it's a hindrance or whether it's a help. Okay? The other thing we like to look at is where does it need improvement? So we just ask them outright, where does it need improvement? Okay? So what we're going to do, again, we're going to compile all this information. Where do you think it needs an improvement? How, and then secondly, how can it benefit you more, right? So I ask a person, I say, well, how can this benefit you more? Tell me, do you have a quota? Yes, I have a quota. If you sell more, do you get an accelerator, right? Do you get an extra couple points by going 125% over your quota? Yes. Great. What can the CRM do to help you sell more? What can it do to help you close more deals, right? You may get, well, nothing, I don't get enough leads. Okay, well, I need to think about outbound calling or, what are the other opportunities to satisfy the need for that person? Or it may be, it just doesn't do X, right? It doesn't tell me when something went overdue, and that's a workflow that the admin can add in 10 minutes, right? So you really discover how can it help them, how can it benefit them? That's what you want to know is when you get down into all this, how can it benefit the individual user? If you benefit them, they will all get on board and everybody else will have the data that they need. The last thing we do and the most time-consuming part is we pick out a subset of those users and we sit with them for usually about an hour and we just watch them work. So what I do, I'll give you an example. Went to a customer in Kentucky, and they have inside sales reps. They do a lot of inbound calling. And I just sat with one of their top inside salespeople, and I said, you just work. I'll watch. I'll observe. I'll take notes, and every once in a while I may stop you and ask a question, right? So I sat there and I watched her work. And she would go back and forth between a screen. And I'd say, what are you doing there? Oh, well, we have to check the lead queue, the inbound lead queue every 15 minutes. We have to follow up a lead every 15 minutes. And because we do outbound and, inbound, we manage outbound and inbound in a lot of ways. I just go over here to this filter, I drop it down, I look. Okay, so that's a distraction, right? And then she goes back to doing what she's doing, right? So as I sit for an hour, I watch what she does, right? Okay, well, they represent multiple organizations. So they actually handle leads for multiple other organizations. That's what this company does. They generate leads and they onboard the customer and they get paid for the number of customers that they onboard. Okay, so what does she do? She goes over to the other side and she says, okay, well, it's for this company, so I have to use this email template. It's for this company, I have to use this email template. And every time she does that, she has to send it out from their email address. CRM's made for one company out of the box, right? It's made to come from your email address. That's how it's used, right? So she's spending a lot of time going back and forth. And this goes on for an hour, right? I discovered, I think, 10 different things that she was doing where I said, okay, if we solve these problems, how much benefit do we think we can get? How many more leads can she get to? And then how much happier is she with the solution on a day-to-day basis because it helps her do her job more easily. And, again, back to the quota question, if you close more, are you incentivized for that? The user's not going to care if they're not incentivized for it. And some of them won't, right? Some of them are there. Some of them really like their job and they're going to do the best job. Some people are more incentive-based where, hey, every time I close one, if I'm going to do more, then, I get a certain percentage or whatever it is, right? So for like a sales development rep, every time they land a quote, if they get $100, then they want software that's going to help them land more, right? So you have to look at where the incentives align with what the needs are a lot of times. But either way, if you give that user that I sat with the features that are needed, naturally as a top producer, they're going to utilize those. So all I do is I observe, I ask questions, and I find opportunities, right? A lot of vendors hate it. I'm sure some of our partners hate it if I say it, but 90% of these things are the same out of the box. If I pull up Salesforce Dynamics, Sugar, Zoho, they all got reports and emails and accounts and opportunities and lead flow and pipeline and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? It's the last 10% where you customize it for your business that really makes the difference, okay? So this is that last 10%. Nobody can come in as a generic vendor and go, oh, well, you just need to solve the problem that she's sending from 3 different emails, right? Only their business does that. You know, maybe some other ones out there, but you have to actually discover those. So what we do here is we go to each one of these users and we sit with them for an hour and we discover. And then we compile all of this up into deliverables. And this is just a highlight of the deliverables. These are the deliverables you would want to create for your management, right? So if you're going to have time to do this, they're going to want some sort of deliverable. Our deliverable is like a 20-slide deck where we present it to the executive management, say, here's our recommendations. You'd want to do something similar. The overview, the groups and personas that you interviewed, what were the success criteria of this? You know, did you address what you were looking to address and hit the goal for this? And what are the recommendations? So from a business ROI perspective, what are the recommendations? Where are there misalignments? User needs X, business needs Y. We're not going to do anything that user needs, right? And you find out from executive management, they're getting rid of that department, right? You got to know these things, right? So that's why you do all of that upfront work with the executive management. Morale ROI. A lot of things, you know, as was discussed earlier, a lot of things can't come down to a metric. If the users feel like what they're using is garbage, they're just not going to use it. Or they're going to use it enough to keep their job. So if morale is low, you need to be able to present, here's where morale is now. I took that metric for you. Now if you implement everything that I recommended, we're going to go back and we're going to ask the same question. And you're going to know from a morale perspective, how do they feel? And then later you're going to be able to use that, right? So what happens a lot of times we see is, you know, every vendor again, every consultant, you go in, users clamor for X, Y, and Z, you know, oh, well, we got it, we love it, but it doesn't do this, right? And then you implement it for them. And then you look at the data and they're not using it, right? This way you can go back and say, hey, here's where you were, right? As a team, if you guys were my team, I can have a team meeting and say, here's where you were. Here's what we did to help you do your job better. So you make more money, you're happier, you know, all of those different items that you want to outline that's, you know, in line with the culture of your company. And here's where you are now, right? So just know that we're here for you and to make the changes that are needed, and we're always looking for more feedback. And once they see that you're going to implement that feedback, a lot more feedback will start to flow in, okay? There's no easier way to kill the feedback loop of what people need from a CRM perspective than to never implement it or have some way to review it or, you know, let it die on the vine, right? If I'm always getting input from everybody and you never review it as a team and you never implement any of those, and not only implement it, but implement it in a way that they see that you implemented it because they brought it up, then, you know, it's not gonna flow in anymore. This can be recommendations on business ROI items, you know, changes to the CRM, morale ROI, how you think you're going to get a lift, software that you may need. So you may decide, you know, as you sat there, everybody's dialing, you know, they're dialing 60 numbers a day by hand because there's no phone system integration. You need a power dialer, right? You need a power dialer integration. You need to click the call button, whatever budget fits you, right? So if you don't have the budget for a power dialer, and somebody can implement a click to call button in 2 hours, and it's a consulting firm, have them implement the button. Maybe there's an add-on out there that gives you that button, and it doesn't give you everything, but it gives you what you need based on your budget. So there's going to be software recommendations, and there's going to be process recommendations, right? So there's going to be what I like to consider freebies, right? You're going to pay this person to be in the organization either way, so it's easy to fix this problem. It doesn't include software, outside consulting. You know, all it takes is the time that's already budgeted for in that year. So process changes are generally the easiest. And you'll discover process changes from that. You'll sit there and you'll watch those users work, and you'll go, have you ever thought of doing it this way? No, I was trained to do it this way. And they do it that way rotely. Maybe a good thing, maybe a bad thing. Depends on the culture, the job, whatever it might be. So those process improvements are really easy wins. I've gone into organizations where I sat with the user and I said, why do you do it that way? That's how they showed it, you know, that's how they showed me to do it in training. Okay, and I look and I see that the way that they're doing whatever task is 5 clicks. And I say, well, you can go to this screen and then you can page through those 1 click at a time. Oh, I never knew it could do that. Boom. Made them happier, right? They went from, every time they execute this task, they execute 100 times a day, they went from 5 clicks to 1 because I sat with them for a few minutes. And a lot of things are free wins like that. They're great. It just takes the time for somebody to go in and know the CRM, know what it does, and sit there with them for an hour to discover some of those issues. Those are things that aren't going to come up in training. Those are only things that are going to come up by watching the user work. You have any questions? All right. When we present this, as you should, it's on-site delivery. So, again, you would go in and you would deliver this in a slide or however you need to deliver it to your management. Keep in mind that it needs to go up and down the chain, right? So users need to know why you're doing it and that you're there to help them. Management needs to know, that you're going to package that up and you're going to come back to them with, the requested items.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
How big are these projects or these implementations that you do? Because if you deploy CRM for 10,000 users, you just can't sit down with users and managers and do these interviews because you'll never finish.
Agreed. So I guess there's two parts to that question. One is kind of what are the size we normally do, and then what is this implementation? This is a 3-day analysis that we do. And what, the whole goal again was just to give you ideas to go back and the steps that we use. So we do a 3-day. If it's 10,000 users, we will pick a subset of those. So when we interview the CRM owner, we'll say, what department are you really having the problem in, right? So we're not going to do it organization-wide. We're going to do it in pieces. Now, it could be a 3-day analysis for, groups 1, 2, and 3, and then a month later, group 2, 4, 5, and 6, and we'll chunk it up and do multiple sets of this. But from a delivery perspective, we like to give them packaged deliverables for a group. So a lot of times we could be doing this for a 20-user group, right? It could be 150 users, it could be 1,000 users that are in the CRM in the organization, and they're going to come to us and say, the executive sales team just hates using this. This team works great, they love it, but the executive outside sales reps are having a hard time because X, Y, and Z come in and do this package. So we just pick exactly who we're going to deliver it for.
So this process that you go through for 3 days is on organizations that you guys have never deployed CRM on, or
Correct.
organizations you have deployed?
This is organizations, for our firm, this is the only CRM agnostic product we have. So when we go to it, we don't know anything about them. They could be on Dynamics, Salesforce, whatever it is. Normally it's a mid to enterprise level package, right? I mean, there's not a big ROI for having a firm come in to do something like this if you have 10 users. It could, depending on how heavily you use it. But generally, it's a 3-day package for those groups.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, it's the method to do this changes dramatically depending on the company.
Yes.
Even if you have 10 users, if you're completely remote, like a lot of companies are nowadays, it's just tougher and tougher.
It is. What we do, so we usually, since it's 3 days, and why we keep it in that 3 days and not say, well, how many people, and we're going to scale it to 7 days, is because with 3 days, I can go on site for 3 days, no matter where you are, and fly in and take care of this. And then I can deliver on the 3rd day, and then I can come back and do another group a month later. So you can budget that out, or you can do the same thing, right? So you can get budget to go out internally and go deliver it for one group, and then you can leave. Now, the other thing you can do is you can do a screen share. It's not as good. I don't like the screen shares. Mainly the thing you lose in screen share is what are they doing across both screens if they have dual monitors, which is common. If they are dialing or they're writing things down, you miss a lot of that. So, I had one company where I sat there, and every time this guy would do something, he would write something down. I said, why do you do that? And then what are you writing? And he told me about what he was writing, and I was just like, I thought about it. I said, well, why don't you enter it in the CRM? And he had a reason that he didn't enter in the CRM, and it was a different methodology. I was like, okay, how do we overcome that, right? Because if you're kind of doing this twice, maybe he just needed a little widget that was open all the time as a notepad on that account that he could just log to quickly so he could progress faster, right? So it's really hard to see if you're not on site. The only other way I could think of, and we haven't done it, is to have some sort of camera, but then by the time you do all those logistics, you could have just flown out there, right? So that's how we try to chunk it up. Any other questions from this? Is this helpful? Does this give you any kind of food for thought on how to overcome some of these user adoption issues? All right. Easy enough. Well, thank you for coming out. I don't know if we have the next CRM meetup scheduled. If you have any ideas, feel free to send them over to us. You can send them through Meetup. You can email me or Ryan, anybody on the team. We're organizers in the meetup.com group. If you have somebody that you think would be a good presenter, maybe a customer that's had adoption issues or has adopted new software and wants to talk about it, whatever it might be, send that over to us. We're always looking for great presentations. So thank you.